Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a reel that Sami sent in, and I did a preview of the 20 plus reels that he sent in, but I probably haven't aired that yet. But that's okay. One way or another, we're going to get through most of these. Well, this is an Okuma Cold Water. It's a Linecounter reel. It's a low-profile bait casting reel suitable for the salt waters and inshore. And I believe Sami is working or fishes in the San Francisco Bay area. So we're going to show you how to take this apart, how to service it. A couple of the warnings in here about this thing. And well, we're going to get started, and hopefully we'll be able to pass along what I know to you so that you can do it yourself if you have one of these. So the Okuma Cold Waters are nice reels. You're going to see when we open them up. They're well made. And I don't know the price point on them. I probably should have looked that up. But overall, a nice reel, and I think for the most part, the Okuma line is a good line all around. All right, the way we get started is we remove most of the exterior pieces. That starts with that tie-down clamp and the hold-down screw. And we'll take off that 10mm nut cap. And I think I'm going to have to adjust my camera just a little bit as we do that. Well, what I want to do is, let's see if we can just move, there you go. I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you like these kinds of videos. And if you do, hit the notification button. That'll tell you when I'm posting the videos. I post quite frequently. And you'll get a chance to see the reels I'm working on, and you'll be able to determine whether it's a reel you want to see. I'm working on all kinds of reels, and this one being a low-profile Linecounter reel. All right, there's a flat washer that comes up first, and then there's a click mechanism with a couple of tension washers inside of that, and then we're down to the collar for the adjuster. When I take these off, I always like to put them into my parts tray. I use a fast food container for that purpose, and you can use whatever you like, but just have an organization plan that helps you to get all of these done. Well, there's a couple of things going on here now. There's only one screw that you can see here. There is one in the back. Interestingly enough, there's two under the spool here that are holding that side plate. This screw up here is actually holding this side plate. And then we have this Linecounter mechanism. Well, that's the one that of all should be the caution, because it's very difficult to take this side plate off and maintain the integrity of the Linecounter with that attached to the side plate. And interestingly enough, it makes it look like it'll just come apart, but it doesn't. All right, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to take that pin out that is holding the left side plate. This is a right-sided crank wheel. This is a spring-loaded clip. There we go. Pull it out. And then you pull up, if I remember. Yep, you pull up. And then you can remove the non-gear side plate. Now, there's nothing going on in here. There's a little shuttle here. Holds the bearing that's on the spool. And behind that, we have a dirty idler gear. So we'll go right here first, just because it's easiest. I'm going to take the two screws off of this little cover. And we'll clean up the drive behind there. That's a plastic idler gear. Most of the level line reels will use plastic idler gears. And I just did a video on diagnosing a line guide failure. And if you're interested in why they use the plastic ones, well, that's a good place to start. I'm just going to leave these two screws right on my plate. Actually, there's three of them. I'm going to leave them right on the board here, because all I want to do is take this off, mop up the excess grease on the old piece, and then put it right back together again. All right. This should simply remove. Here's your idler gear. And if you wanted to, you could pull that screw, or you can just kind of rotate it. I'm going to put a little bit of WD-40 on there. It's a penetrating oil. I don't care which one you use, but use that to break down the grease like we did here. And actually, this one has been greased, but it doesn't need to be. It's a plastic, and a plastic is a self-lubricating piece. Notice that you have a click ring on the back here. Once you cleaned it up, you have a split in the back ring here for this click mechanism. Pull the mechanism all the way up top, look over it, and then make sure you get that point into that click mechanism there to properly seat it like we just did there. All right, there's 3 screws. You can go put those back in, and this side plate is essentially serviced. So, doesn't matter what path you take to completely service the reel. Sometimes you can start on the side plate that's not the business end. Sometimes maybe you want to get started on that business end right away. Kind of do something else a little bit later. That's okay. Whatever pattern you would want to use, go ahead and do it. Just don't lose track of where you are. And if you do, one of the best things to do is to do kind of what I'm doing here. It's not explicit, it's implicit, I guess, but I'm taking pictures, and I would recommend that you take pictures too. That way you can see how the reel came apart, and well, if you have any issues along the way, maybe orientation of a piece or part or something, you can always go back and look at your pictures. You can use a cell phone or a digital camera. You don't have to take a video like I'm doing here, but if you want to do a video, go right ahead and do that. Okay, that takes care of this plate, and I'm just going to put that aside. Big pieces don't have to go into the part tray. All right, the spool should come out next. Notice we have 2 bearings on the spool. Give them a spin, make sure that they work. And Sami gave me about 20 reels to service. It's the end of his season there. And I got to say that it's a pleasure working on his reels because, well, among other things, they've been kept well. He's also knots these and puts these around the handle that tends to jam. Just put a little oil, fishing reel oil, on both sides, and then just set the spool off for later reassembly. Well, here's those 2 pieces I was talking about here, the 2 screws. One is on this side and one is on this side, and they're partially responsible for holding the side plate on. What I want to do before I forget, because this is one of those that kind of will come back to get you if you don't do it properly, you need to remove the line counter on this one. The reason for that is that when it's attached to the side plate like it is here, the actual bar for the line counter drive is behind the main gear. And if you go to pull that side plate off with the bar behind the main gear, the piece is going to bend or break or somehow otherwise inhibit you from getting that off. So I'm going to take that off right now. There's 3 screws that attach it. There's 2 long ones, and this back one underneath here is a short one. And you'll notice I'm using a micro driver to do that because, well, this back one here is very small. And what I'll do with these is I'm going to find a separate place in that parts tray, maybe one corner somewhere, and I'm just going to put them into that corner. Well, that can remove, or at least it loosens up the drive. We'll get back to that in a moment. There's 2 more screws. In addition to the 2 here, there's 1 on that side and then 1 in the front. I'm going to start by taking those 2 that are inside the spool cavity. We'll take those out. This is a Phillips head screwdriver. And the parts tray is very valuable here because there's a lot of little parts, and if you leave them laying on your desk, well, it's going to be a problem later on. I got one of them out, I guess the other one I didn't. So that goes into a separate corner of my parts tray, and the parts tray is a fast food container, but it's interesting, it's a 2-compartment fast food container. And what I like about that is that the gives me 8 corners. And so I can tuck things into corners to keep them organized. All right, we have a long, smaller screw on the back here. And then we have its counterpart on the front, just a little bit shorter. So I'm going to put those in yet another corner. And then we can go about showing you how to take the side plate out without injuring the line guide mechanism. All right, that should just about do this. So other than the line guide being the interesting piece here, For the most part, the reel is a generic type of a reel. All right, so I've loosened that up. I want to pull this. You can take the shield off. Be careful. These things are tough. If you did not take this off, this is a plastic worm gear drive. I'll show you the inside in a moment, but it's on a wire center. You can see the wire here. And if you put any pressure on that, you're going to bend it. And if you bend it, it's going to ruin the function. All right, now we should be able to pull this side plate off. And underneath here, you'll see we got some dirt, so we're going to go ahead and clean that up. I'm going to use a paper towel here to kind of mop that up. You can use a paper towel. You can use sprays if you like. We have an instant anti-reverse there. You don't want to go too far with that in terms of oiling or greasing. Just, it's a friction device. Leave it alone. There's a bearing there that I've just oiled. This says it's a 4-ball bearing set. All right, I'm going to take that line guide mechanism. I'm just going to tuck it back in here for now, just so that it doesn't bang around. Just got to line it up. You want to be careful with these. There we go. I'm just going to tuck that in and leave that as it is. That goes into my parts tray. And here's the problem. If you were to pull that side plate out without detaching that worm gear shaft for your guide is here. So you would be pulling against the main gear and it wouldn't come out. All right. The things that come out real easy in this reel that I want to take care of right away are these 2 little yoke springs. I'm going to put those off to the side. I have a habit of turning things over and upside down like that. And well, if those yoke springs were on there, that yoke spring would shoot. All right, here's your main gear. I'm going to go clean all of that up. I want to take my pinion gear and yoke off. And for the most part, we're down to the point where it's clean and reassemble time. We've pretty much done some stuff along the way. I'm going to just flood this with some WD-40 here. And the last thing I want to do before I go too much further here, I'm going to stack this for a moment. We'll get back to those drags in just a moment. You can see that all of the lube and that has been kind of run out of these. Folks, that's why I wear that protective glove. Well, that's one of the reasons right there. You get a lot of old greases and dirt and grime that you can't be certain about. And I like to do that. I'm going to remove this shaft. I'm not sure, I don't recall specifically if there's a ball bearing under here or not. Notice this when you do this. Notice the orientation of the piece so that when you go to reinstall, you reinstall it properly. I'm going to leave those screws right on my table too, because all I want to do is pull this up, pull this out. There is no ball bearing. There is some dirt. It's a bushing. Sometimes you find a ball bearing back there. I'm going to do just what we did with the other one. Now this is smooth sailing. Only the inner part of that is rolling, so I'm going to oil that. Then we go right back in and reinstall. Press that down. And here's what I meant by the orientation. You're going to see on this piece here, you have a little piece that kind of swoops down, but doesn't do that on this side. Well, this is your drive for your line counter, and if you put it in backwards, your line counter drive would not work properly. All right, we're going to go grab the 2 screws and put those right back in. So if you have a question on this reel or any reel in particular, if you leave that in the comment section, I do try to answer those questions. Maybe one of your questions is, why did I just put grease on the screwdriver tip? Well, me and little screws don't get along very well, and that grease tends to act as a very temporary glue to kind of hold it while I get that started. Okay, the WD-40 appears to have done its work. There wasn't much under there. As I mentioned, Sami has done a nice job here of keeping his reels serviced. He had mentioned that a lot of these reels that I will be working on, and you'll see in future episodes. They're about 3 years old or less, and most of them probably have never been serviced. But he does keep the exteriors nice and clean, and that's game one in terms of making sure that your wheels work. Well, we can tell it's the original Okuma grease in here. The Okuma grease is that hot sauce stuff, and it's purple. I'm just going to go clean all of the old greases out. So much of the reel service is cleaning, inspecting, relubing, and reassembling. All right, on this yoke here, you're going to notice that we have angled pieces to that. They correspond with the angles on the trip lever here that's facing in. On your pinion gear, you have a set of grooves, and the long thin side, the grooves, except the spool, they go to the back of the reel, and the back of the reel is the piece with the angles. So we've got that installed. I'm just going to take a little bit of grease now, get it all over this pinion gear and the like. I got a little bit too much on there. I'm going to wipe some of that down. Sometimes that grease comes out of my brush in chunks, and well, you don't need the chunks. All right, both of those get assembled like this. And make sure that it's sitting nice and flush. You can see how that angle matches the angle. And you pretty much have done that piece. Let's go back then to the main gear. We noted a couple of things with that. Lots of dirt from old grease getting pushed out. You don't need to grease these too much. The idea of greasing them is to keep them flexible. It doesn't provide any more drag or anything like that. And what it does sometimes is cause it extra slip. If you put too much on, it's only going to squeeze out, and the squeezing out is going to collect dirt and debris. And well, once you get that dirt and debris in your reel, it's going to bog the performance. I'm just going to use a little bit of a steel wool here to polish up some of the dried on grease there. This is your click ratchet. This is the one that's going to flip your free spool back when you're done. And if I had lost orientation, it could have been two ways, a shiny side and not, but I'm looking here, and that's kind of the wear pattern for the washer that sits on top of that. So it doesn't matter which way you install this one, some it does. Notice that there's two flat sides. You have to follow the flat sides of your main stem down, and then this red washer goes on top of that. Next thing to do is inspect the teeth of the gear. If you notice that there's any grease or junk or debris or the like in there, go ahead and take a soft bristle brush. Just kind of work it through and knock out the old grease or dirt that might be in there. Once you've inspected all the teeth to make sure that they're uniform and nice and in the same pattern and not bent or chipped or cracked or anything, go back to your grease brush, get some more grease, and you don't have to get it on every tooth. Remember what you just saw before, it all got squeezed out, right? Just get enough that you're satisfied that it's done well. Take your main gear and put that over the gear shaft and make sure you mesh it with your pinion gear. Okay, we have 3 washers here. They're all the same, doesn't matter which way they go. These have plenty of grease on them. I'm not a fan of greasing these, but if you want to, just a light coat of grease is all you need. First one in then we have, you're going to see 2 rectangular ones. They're called keyed washers. You can see the dirt just kind of coming off. Those are top and bottom. Second one in. The middle one has got the big hole in the middle. The 2 tabs are called eared washers. They go in next. And we got a top washer here. And we got the cap washer, or the second keyed washer. It's a little bit thicker than the first one. That goes on the top. Just looking for this, it rolled off my table. So that's a good example of why you want to make sure that you keep your pieces and parts in a parts tray. All right, this is the part for the instant anti-reverse that goes on. There's 2 springs. We took those off earlier. They go on next. And we're kind of getting ready for the reassembly here. All right, well, this is where it gets a little bit tricky on the back end now because of the way that that piece holds. I just noticed everything started falling down there. Looks like I'm going to have to do a little bit of reassembly, but I want to get that corrosion off this bar before I do that. Okay, once we've done that whole assembly then, reinstalled everything, let's go back to this plate now. And of course, we still have to get that line counter in there. But to do this, you want to start by putting this over the top and getting that long bar through this small hole here. So let's kind of work that. Center that hole, center the piece, and right about there. That's about how you want to go right now. You're going to notice on the back end of this case that there is a U shape right here, right there. That's going to hold the bar from the line counter. That's this bar. So next up then is to work this in and get that bar seated properly into the case, just like that. With that in and a nice snap, probably need one more hand, but I like to get the small screws in here to hold the line counter in place first. And then come back and put a case screw in. And then you kind of free your hands up a little bit better. Make that a little long one here. So if you didn't do it that way, if you had pulled the case off without removing the line counter, well, you were going to have probably a bent shaft. And when you went to use the line counter, it probably wouldn't connect with the wheel that's driving it. All right, I'm going to take my 2 case screws now that I put into one corner that I know belong to the front side of this reel. And we'll put those on next. The short one goes in the front, the longer stem one goes in the back. These are nice reels. They're bigger than your freshwater bassing reels. A little bit more sturdy. I don't personally like line counter reels. It's just another thing to break, and I don't use them, but I understand why they are used. And if you're in that place where you're trolling or you're fishing at a certain depth and you know that the fish are however many feet down and about, well, then that's a good one to have. I can remember learning of fishing of bluefish a long time ago, and it was always count the number of pulls from the time your bait hit the water, count the number of times you've pulled out before you got a strike, and then the next time, well, just go to that same number. So, for example, if it took you 25 pulls at about a yard apiece, I guess your line counter would probably tell you that you're at 75 out. But in most cases, the manual way worked just as well. All right, I'm just putting that last piece in here. Finish tightening up that second screw. Interesting to note on the back end of this one, right? Notice that this drives the line counter, not this. You saw the plastic wheel on the inside that was the drive. That plastic wheel intersects with the stem that was coming off of this. And if you turn this, you'll notice that the line counter is doing what it should be doing there. All right, before I close this up, I do want to just put some oil onto the pawl. I could have removed this bull nose, but I put the other side back on, so I'm just going to just work around that. Move your line guide to the center of your piece. Just use a screwdriver. Remove the pawl cap. Drop of oil into the pawl cap. Drop of oil onto the worm drive. Just reset it. Be careful with these. These are plastic. And if you do not center these up properly. If you try to cross thread them, you will have the plastic shatter on you. So snug, do not over tighten. Just check to make sure that it's riding nicely, which it is. We've already oiled the bearings on both sides. Keep that line nice and tight, and you can go ahead and put just a little bit of grease onto the shaft, which is going to ride inside the pinion gear. Go ahead and put that in. Make sure that you do not trap that line on either side of the case. Last up then, we just want to take that top piece. Remember how this came in, right? It came in from the top. So you want to seat this. Make sure that it's nice and tight. Like that. Pull it down so it's a nice tight fit. And then remember, this is the spring-driven piece that's holding it all. So you have to push in while you're turning the screw head to make sure that it compresses that spring and sits properly. All right, back to the handle then. We start with the shim washer. Right here, this is a bearing shim washer, kind of very thin washer that goes on top of the cap. Then we have our assembly, which has the face up. It's a U-shaped piece. The face goes up on this. This one actually had two small washers on there. Then the face goes up, point out. Then you have the two tension washers. They're not flat, do not flatten them. That provides sensitivity on the star adjuster. I usually put them face to face, so one's cupped up, one gets cupped down. And on top of that goes the flat washer, and then the star adjuster. All right, that's all stacked together. I'll put the star adjuster back on. Again, be patient with these. Make sure that you've got it threading properly. Don't cross strip them. That's the risk of working with these. They're not easy to start, but once you get them on, they're easy to kind of flip back down. Then you're going to have to hold the stem while you clear that little noisemaker that's going to compress that point to make the noise. There we go. But you have to hold the stem. All right, in my parts tray, we're coming down to mostly the end of this. There's a little tension washer that goes underneath the handle. Then we have the handle. And we have that 10mm nut cap. I'm looking at my parts tray. I got a piece in here that I know where it goes that I somehow overlooked. So we'll catch up on that so that nobody has to write in and say, hey, you forgot to put that little screw back in. We'll get that back in a moment. Generally speaking, if you have this on a perpendicular to the hole, your nut cap or clamp tie down will work. Just like that. It lines up perfectly. It'll also line up perfectly if you have the point of that cap pointing right at it. Let's go ahead and put that back in. And then my one little mystery screw. Right here. Do you remember where it came from? I do. If you didn't, you could take a picture, right? You can go back to your pictures and figure it out. This one's going to require a little bit of grease for glue. And if you haven't figured it out. Okay, with the screw installed then, it's time for a test. Well, I guess that tells us that when we reset that click mechanism, it certainly got reset properly because we're clicking. Give it a ride. Nice and easy ride in there, right? Make sure that your free spool works, which it does. Turn it, make sure that it pops. It does. Make sure your line counter is counting away. Tighten your drags. There you go, nice and tight. Back them off after that so that you don't squeeze out whatever lubrication is there. That's it. That is your Okuma Cold Water, I'll call it an inshore bait casting reel with a Linecounter feature on it. Very nice reel. I like them a lot. And as I mentioned, Okuma for the most part has quality products, and they're well made. So if you have any questions, again, please leave them. If you like these kinds of videos, please subscribe. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. To everyone, enjoy the holiday season. For those of you that are first responders, again, I'm appreciative of all that you do. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.